The history of the Jewish people began more than 3,000 years ago. In the desert, an idea developed of the one and only God, one who tolerates no other gods but him. Monotheism was an idea that would change the world. War and persecution scattered the Jews all around the world. It's a story of splendor and suffering that leads right up to the present day. They've left their mark as great thinkers, scientists and artists. How did the Jews manage to maintain their identity over all these years? The Jews, history of a people. For 1,000 years, Spain has been the home of many Jews until the Catholic kings begin to persecute those of a different faith. In 1492, the Jews are faced by a choice: baptism or exile. Most stay faithful to their beliefs. They leave their home. It's a journey from a great past into an uncertain future. Part 4. The Star of David. Antwerp, Europe's biggest port, provides a safe refuge, for example, for Doña Gracia Mendes. Doña Gracia was a Jew who had been forcibly baptized. She had to pray in secret. To the outside, she was a Christian. Not even her own sister, Brianda, a staunch Christian, was allowed to know what she really believed. Doña Gracia inherited an influential banking and trading empire from her husband. She had connections all over Europe, but nobody was safe from the Spanish inquisitors. The horror stories she was told by her parents haunted her. Her family got baptized for fear of persecution, but in the eyes of the Christian community they were still only marranos, pigs, a despised and tortured minority. Everyone was suspected of secretly following the old faith. Torture forced a confession out of everyone, and that was punished by death. Now the Inquisition also reached Antwerp. Again, flight was the only option. Venice, the new world power, was considered a safe haven. The city had the reputation of opening its gates to all refugees. Whether of a different faith or not, here you were a Venetian and merchant first and foremost, but then also a Christian. As a businesswoman with international connections, Doña Gracia was welcome here. The Doges appreciated any capital. A Jewish manuscript from the time illustrates religious and everyday life. Jews were intellectuals, physicians and musicians at the Italian courts. They wore elegant, fashionable clothing and did not speak the languages they brought with them, but Italian. But they were only tolerated as long as the powerful profited from them. Doña Gracia lived beside the Grand Canal in the Palazzo Gritti, an exclusive address then as it is now. It was opposite the Ottoman Trading Centre, one of her business partners. She was living the life of a Christian, but in Venice she had the opportunity to meet avowed Jews for the first time. In the ghetto of Venice, they were allowed to openly live their faith. The ghetto had only just been created. The church insisted that Jews be separated from the Christian population, so they were driven off onto a marshy island that, in those days, lay on the outskirts of the city. This was where the metal casters worked. The new quarter was named after them, ghetto, from the Italian word gettare, to cast. The name established itself, and soon the word ghetto was used for any closed Jewish city quarter. Jewish refugees were pouring into Venice. Soon the ghetto was overflowing. In order to create more living space, more stories were built. To this day, the houses in the ghetto are the highest in Venice. After sundown, the bridges are closed off and the barriers lowered down, but still it is the place where the Jews of Venice have a right to live in safety for the first time. The quarter kept its character right into the 20th century, until the Nazis deported all Jews from Venice in 1944. After the end of fascism, only a few of the survivors returned to this place. Donna Gracia enters her religious home with a pounding heart. "Hide your cross," she warns her sister Brianda. Forcibly baptized Jews were viewed with suspicion here as well. They were like a boat without paddles, on the borders between the religions. The two sisters had different feelings about this Jewish world that they only knew from the stories of their parents. Brianda, the faithful Christian, is feeling uneasy. Donna Gracia, the secret Jew, is experiencing curiosity, perhaps even longing. The conflict of the two religions drives a wedge between the two sisters. Brianda comes up with a deceitful plan. The business people in Venice always ask, what's new on the Rialto? On the Rialto, money flows like water. The Pope has forbidden Christians to lend money at interest, but Venice, a financial centre, makes its own laws. Christian banks give big credits to rich merchants, and an annual interest rate of 50% is not considered extortionate. The applicants that don't promise a profit are sent to the ghetto. The Jewish moneylenders are forced to give small credits even to the poor for only 5% interest, an officially decreed social policy for the benefit of the Christian underclass. Venice needs the Jews as it needs bakers, it was said. Donna Gracia is visiting her Jewish banker. She has a particular concern. Secretly, she is donating money to the Jewish refugees from Spain and Portugal for the construction of new houses of worship. As a result, she makes a name for herself amongst the Jews. One day, she decides to go to the synagogue of the Spanish Jews. It's the first time that she's entered a Jewish house of worship. There are treasures and splendor wherever she looks. The beauty of the building and of the Jewish cult shine beyond the ghetto's borders and attract even Christian visitors. Even here, Doña Gracia prays in secret because the reach of the Inquisition is long.
The world of the Marrano was of the secret Jew was a world of deception. It was a world also in which deception of the Marrano could be fatal. In other words, somebody who is secretly practicing Judaism could be betrayed by anyone with a particular gripe, anybody who had personal issues or a vendetta.
In 1547, the Inquisition also reaches Venice under pressure from the Pope. Business is booming for informers. Doña Gracia's sister Brianda also becomes a traitor. She tells the tribunal that Doña Gracia is secretly practicing the Jewish religion. The proof? A Hebrew book of prayer decorated with the family's coat of arms. And in addition, she says, her sister is planning to flee from Venice with her entire fortune. Immediately, a warrant of arrest is issued for Doña Gracia. The Catholic Church has always been particularly severe with apostate Christians. In Europe, another religious war is being waged, one that is shaking the Church to its foundations. The trigger was an Augustinian monk in distant Wittenberg in Germany. Martin Luther also has a difficult relationship with the Jews. To start with, he still defends them against Christian prejudices. In his manuscript, That Jesus Was a Jew by Birth, he emphasizes the Jewish roots of Christianity. Luther hopes to convert the Jews to the new faith, but the zeal of the Protestant missionaries is not enough. The friend of the Jew becomes their enemy. Then he writes, on the Jews and their lies. They are, he says, poisonous, bitter, rapacious, malicious enemies of the Christians, a pestilence and plague that needs to be exterminated.
Das ist einfach ungeheuer tragisch, weil
That's terribly tragic because Luther developed a real program of Jew hatred, how people were supposed to go about it. He even went so far as to say that not only did they spread their lies in the synagogues, but also in their homes, which meant that all their houses should be torn down because they spread their lies there too. And there was a terrible moment with Luther where he claimed that the Jews had a pact with the devil. These are arguments and ideas that he spread and that were still around during the Nazi time and even later. The connection of Judaism with Satan and how people are supposed to treat them.
In der Nazizeit noch später immer noch aufgenommen wurden und Gültigkeit haben. Die Verbindung des Judentums mit Satan und wie man mit ihnen umzugehen hat.
Jews are caught in the middle of the religious wars. For all that the Protestants and Catholics are fighting each other, they agree on one point: their hatred of the Jews. The Jews turn increasingly to the east. Constantinople, the city on the Bosphorus, becomes the new destination of their hopes. Thousands looked for a refuge here, far away from the Christian sphere of influence. Tolerant sultans rule from the Topkapi Palace. They realized that Jews bring a lot of money and new knowledge from Europe with them. The Christian rulers make their countries poorer and enrich ours instead, they say in wonder. Doña Gracia manages to flee from Venice. The Sultan welcomes her in a private audience and pays her his respect. He doesn't make her drop to her knees, the sign of subordination. The woman of another faith has a huge fortune and worldwide economic contacts. Doña Gracia takes advantage of the ruler's favor. She asks him to extend the borders of his realm even further. She puts her own wealth behind this good deed.
Her story, the mythology about her example of loyalty to her people was such that she became the subject of myth, of song. Synagogues that she endowed even today in Istanbul as well, still called the Synagogue of La Signora, Hagveret, of the woman. And everybody knows when you say La Signora that you're referring to Dona Gracia Mendes.
Doña Gracia becomes a helper for refugees. She hires powerful ships and builds a network of helpers. She's able to save hundreds of Jews. They are safe in Constantinople. Out of gratitude and as a constant reminder of their rescue, the refugees build a synagogue with a special prayer pulpit in the shape of a ship. The descendants of the escapees still honor the tradition. From the 16th century to this day, the Jewish community has been living in safety and peace with its Islamic neighbors. During the 16th century, the Jewish community in the Ottoman Empire was the largest in the world. Here, Jews were able to live unhindered and honor their religious traditions. Where you are welcome, you don't have to isolate yourself. Many Jews adapt to the culture of their Oriental surroundings. And this culture learns from its guests. The refugees bring a new invention from Europe with them: printing. Jewish specialists don't just print their own religious texts, but also the first books of Islam. Doña Gracia has the Bible translated into Spanish and reproduced. Now the forcibly baptized Jews are able to follow the religion of their fathers again. The first edition is dedicated to her. Even during her lifetime, this courageous woman is honored as the savior of her people, in poems and songs too. She became your proven pillar during your weakness, a bench on which the tired could find rest, like a shady tree under which the despairing could recover. After a nearly 20-year odyssey, Doña Gracia finds peace. In Constantinople, she's able to practice her faith freely and without fear of persecution. On this particular Friday, she is celebrating the Sabbath, and, as is the Jewish custom, she pleads for the blessing of her family and her tortured people. God has saved her from many dangers, and often she was his hand, so she believes, when she was able to help the persecuted and when she was donating money for schools, orphanages and synagogues. Now she's dreaming of a return to the Promised Land, like many faithful Jews. Perhaps her grave is on the Mount of Olives outside the gates of Jerusalem, there where her husband also lies buried. Here, Doña Gracia's trail runs cold. In Jerusalem, Constantinople and Venice, the Spanish Jews, the Sephardim, find a new home. The Ashkenazi Jews in France and Germany are also looking for a safe haven. They are fleeing from persecution, poverty and oppression further and further towards the east. Their hope is Poland. The widower Samuel Leibusch from Regensburg joins a refugee trek together with his daughter Rachel. An old Jewish legend lends them courage. At one time, Jews were said to have received a letter from heaven. It said, Polin, in English, dwell here. That's how Poland got its name, the Jewish immigrants tell themselves. Poland, an underdeveloped agrarian country in desperate need of craftsmen and business people. Would Samuel make his fortune as a goldsmith and coiner? His destination is Krakow. For centuries, Jews and Christians have lived in peace around the marketplace. The new arrivals are protected by royal privileges. They're allowed to practice their religion, purchase homes and land, and engage in unrestricted trading. Krakow becomes the spiritual center of Judaism in Europe. The Jewish intellectuals are in close communication with the University of Krakow, which was built in the middle of the Jewish quarter during the 14th century. In Poland, the Jews are also permitted to become craftsmen. As shoemakers, tailors, goldsmiths, and as furriers, they are even organized in their own guilds. Right into the 20th century, these were typically Jewish occupations. What will the future hold in store for Rachel? In Krakow, she's safe from persecution. But as the only daughter, she has to run the household for her father and help out on the market until she gets married. In those days, there was compulsory education only for Jewish boys. Samuel Leibusch manages to make himself indispensable to the aristocracy as a supplier of luxury gold and silver goods. Like many Jews, he now also belongs to the country's new middle class, between the peasantry and the nobility. The close relationship to the nobility also finds its expression in clothing. The Jews adopt the dress of the Polish nobility during the 17th century, when the latter start dressing in the Western fashion: the black silk kaftan, the streimel, a voluminous fur hat made of sable, white stockings and buckled shoes. To this day, one group of religious Jews, the Hasidim, still wear this dress. This way they maintain the memory of their ancestors and the dream of a better life everywhere in the world. The Polish kings who guarantee the Jews protection and privileges rule from Wawel Castle. They called Jews to their backward country to develop it and promote trade. Casimir the Great was considered their special patron in the 14th century. His unrequited love for the beautiful Jewess Esther is said to have been his motive. Did this love really exist? What is certain is that the king needed the Jews. With this document, he gave the Jews land when they were driven out of Krakow by the envious Christians. On the other river bank opposite his castle, the Jewish settlement of Kazimierz was built. And this time, the Christians are forbidden to live here for the protection of the Jews. The Jewish inhabitants live in peace for a long time after their persecution and oppression in Western Europe. Samuel Leibusch is a witness to a robbery and turns to the municipal council. The Jews of Kazimierz have their own municipal rights and their own administration, a situation unique in Europe during the 16th century. The Kahal, a council made up of rabbis and community elders, address all public questions. It doesn't just deal with judicial issues. but also collects the community's taxes and deals with the care of the sick and elderly. The accused had broken one of the 10 commandments, "Thou shalt not steal." He is convicted under Jewish law, the halakha. For thousands of years it's been regulating religious and social life and is constantly being adapted to everyday life. The punishment for theft is dependent on the severity of the offence. The pillory in the anteroom of the synagogue, a ban on exercising one's profession, prison, or even exclusion from the community are all possible punishments. Kazimierz remained one of the largest and most significant Jewish communities in Europe for 600 years. People live in close proximity in the streets and squares all around the synagogue, because according to Jewish law, a Jew is not allowed to walk more than 1,000 meters from his house to the synagogue. In the atmosphere of freedom and economic success, the shtetl developed. The unique culture of Eastern European Jewry with its own customs, its own language, Yiddish, and its own music, klezmer. He grew up in this world. Leopold Kozłowski, scion of a famous dynasty of musicians. Music saved his life twice. First, when he was fighting as a partisan against the Nazis and a bullet got stuck in his accordion, and then he survived the concentration camp because he played in the orchestra there. Klezmer comes from the Hebrew for musical instrument. The klezmorim, the musicians, had been moving from village to village since the Middle Ages, playing at weddings and religious festivals. Melodies full of melancholy and at the same time full of cheerfulness.
Kiedy ludzie byli zmęczeni,
when the people were despairing, when they were without hope, they said to me, "Leopold, play for us." And I played and saw how they began to smile. I also played for the prisoners in the concentration camp. They started remembering their homes, their shtetls again.
Nagle zobaczyli swoje miasteczka, swoje sztetl.
Music is the best medicine. Nothing can heal people better from their suffering. And because my music saved me, I want to save it in turn from being forgotten.
I dlatego, jeśli muzyka mnie uzdrowiła, ja ją uzdrawiam.
Jewish life in Krakow was extinguished, destroyed by National Socialist mass murder. Nearly 3.5 million Jews were living in Poland before World War II. Only their memory keeps them alive. The cemetery of Krakow is still a magnet for Jews from all around the world. They're laying small stones on the graves. It's an ancient Jewish custom to symbolically cover the dead, since in the desert they couldn't be buried. The memory of their ancestors is supposed to last forever, just like a stone. On the graves, an old symbol gained a new meaning. The Star of David stands for the unity and strength of the Jewish community. Its history began in Prague around the mid-14th century. In the small streets surrounding the castle, the Jews of Prague also enjoyed the favour of the ruler. For the first time in Jewish history, they received the right to have their own flag, a sign of strength and independence. The community had a six-pointed star sewn onto the flag, formed by two triangles. The triangle recalls the Greek letter delta, the initial of the biblical King David. The Star of David became the symbol of the Jews in Prague. They decorated their private and religious objects with it, like the synagogue candelabra. From Prague, the Star of David spread to all Jewish communities in Europe. The common symbol created unity in a people that was living dispersed in many countries. It is said that the Jews proudly carried the flag for the first time in the 30 Years' War, when in 1648 the Protestant Swedes besieged Prague. A Jewish unit defended the city together with the Catholics. Nothing unites better than a common threat. In memory of this event, a copy of this flag still hangs in what is known as the Altneuschule, or Old New Synagogue in Prague. "300 years later, during the Nazi era, all Jews were forced to wear a yellow star. The Star of David became a symbol of exclusion and annihilation." At the founding of the State of Israel, it was put back on the flag again. Despite everything, the symbol of strength had survived. Symbols and legends were a source of hope and the ability to survive, just like the story of Rabbi Judah Löw from Prague, whose grave is still visited by many pilgrims today. With the help of Jewish mysticism, the rabbi is said to have created a creature made of clay, the golem, a soulless creature with supernatural powers that was meant to protect the Jews of Prague from their persecutors. A silent film of the 1920s spread the legend to the world. A note with the Hebrew name of God awakened the golem to life. In the film, the longed-for savior became a monster and turned on his creator in the Jewish community. Rabbi Löw had to destroy him. The original idea of this legend was actually a different one.
Da sieht man ganz deutlich, wie hier jetzt ein Traum
You can
entsteht
see
von
quite
einer
clearly here how a dream of a savior figure that protects the Jews arose, a hero who helped the intellectual Rabbi Löw and thereby prevented ritual murder and other similar atrocities, such as expulsion from Prague. That had a very strong symbolic power. Such a savior figure, which you can see from the success of this legend and from the motif of the golems as savior figures of the community that was brought into children's books from the 19th century to this day.
Bis in die Gegenwart, bis in Kinderbücher von heute getragen wurde.
Back in the 17th century, many Jews are moving further east, in search of peace and prosperity. Their destination is the Polish-Lithuanian Aristocratic Republic. They are more than just tolerated here. A Jewish four-country council is allowed to make laws and administrate the community, like a state within a state. Particularly, the still undeveloped northeast of the state in modern-day Ukraine is considered a land of boundless opportunity. The Jewish writer Joseph Roth wrote, "The Eastern Jews don't have a home anywhere, but graves in every cemetery." The art historian Andrzej Czerzinski reads tombstones like history books. He finds surprising proof for the attractiveness of this religion in those times. I discovered the grave of a Jewish man on which it said, "I am a refugee from the land of the Sephardim, a refugee from Spain whose family took another dangerous journey upon themselves." So great was the attractive power of this region. The researcher has also found traces of one of the most horrific massacres in the history of the Eastern European Jews. The abrupt end of a period of prosperity can be dated exactly. It came in the year 1648. A chronicler records the unfolding of the drama in all its details. Rabbi Nathan Hanover from the Ostro in the Ukraine was the son of a refugee from Hanover. He kept asking himself how fondness could turn to such hatred. He called his chronicle Yevon Mezula, at the abyss of despair. The coexistence of the Jews and the Christians was never entirely free of conflict in Poland and the Ukraine. Nathan Hanover watched with concern how the situation was coming to a head. Particularly on the payday of the Ukrainian peasants. They have to give more than half of their already miserly income to their masters, the landed nobility. They prefer to use Jews to collect the taxes because they have the reputation of being adept businessmen. For the Christian villagers, this is an outrageous provocation. Even though both religions have been living side by side for centuries, the Jews always remained outsiders for many Christians because of their language, Yiddish, their clothing, and their religion. The Christians are suspicious about the good contacts of the Jews with the powerful, as administrators and tenants of the country estates. Meanwhile, the Polish princes are living in European cities such as London or Paris. The Ukrainian peasants are the ones who have to finance this extravagant lifestyle. Nathan Hanover wrote, "They were so tortured and oppressed that even the lowest classes became their masters. They became the slaves of the Polish gentry and of the Jews." Slowly, the hatred began to grow, a ticking time bomb. In 1648, a war breaks out and the Jews are caught in the firing line. Bogdan Chmielnicki, leader of the Ukrainian Cossacks, allies himself with the peasants in a national revolt against foreign Polish rule. They aren't able to fight the nobility, so they turn their weapons on their Jewish administrators, and so against all Jews, both rich and poor. The revolt spreads like wildfire. More and more Ukrainian peasants join the uprising. Everywhere, Jewish towns and villages are being burned. Chmielnicki moves through Poland, Lithuania and the Ukraine for an entire year, killing and plundering wherever he goes. The news reaches Ostro, the village of Nathan Hanover. Like many, he closes his eyes to the events and hopes that his community will be spared by the grace of God. And where could they go anyway? Nathan has to watch the atrocities committed against men, women and children. Some were skinned alive and their flesh thrown to the dogs to eat. Others had their hands and arms hacked off and their bodies thrown onto the streets so that they were trampled by the horses. There was no murderous cruelty that the enemies didn't commit. Only a few survive in the shelter of synagogues built like fortresses, houses of worship with thick walls and watchtowers. To this day, they recall the threat and persecution of that time. Hundreds of thousands are killed, including Nathan's father. Nathan Hanover himself is able to flee to the safety of Italy. There he publishes his chronicle. The heinous crimes done to his people must never be forgotten. The massacre pushed the entire Eastern European Jewry into a dramatic crisis. 300 villages were snuffed out. It was the end of a long era of security, peace, and success. The survivors fled in panic. Never again would they see their Polish homeland, and once again, thousands of Jews were searching for a safe place. Travellers and business people had said that Amsterdam provided protection and freedom. Wherever a Jew was in need of help, he must be helped. That is a sacred duty, as it was for Glickel von Hameln, who wrote in her diary, "My nephew was a respected man in Poland, but after the war he came to us with his wife and daughter without anything." Her memoirs are the first written memories of a Jewish woman. She was the wife of a gem trader, and so she was able to help her poor relatives. In Amsterdam, Glickel asks a marriage broker to find a husband for her eldest daughter. Decisive for a good catch are the family tree and their fortune. It's an investment for the future, not only because of business connections. In times of persecution, it could be life-saving to have relatives in a safe place. 17th century Amsterdam has this advantage. Since 1579, it has had a law stating that nobody may be persecuted because of their faith. It is also a safe haven for Jewish refugees from Spain and Poland. Mokum, place, is what they call the town on the Amstel, in which they were to live in peace for the next 300 years. These days, the people of Amsterdam still call their city Mokum. Amsterdam is a powerful economic centre. More goods are traded here than anywhere else in Europe. The Spanish Jews are esteemed as global players. They speak many languages and have worldwide trading contacts. Jews import diamonds from India. This trade has been in Jewish hands since the 8th century. Jewish moneylenders accept the precious stones as security. They're easily hidden and transported during travel or flight. Glickel von Hameln was dealt a fortunate hand. In the 3 weeks that we were in Amsterdam before the wedding, we managed to earn the dowry. To this day, Jewish dealers influence the diamond business. The elaborate technique of cutting the diamonds was invented by a Jew. Diamond cutting becomes a new craft, one not subject to guild laws. Gluyenberg, An artificial island on the Amstel is the centre of Jewish life. Jews of all countries can move about freely here. Nobody's locked up like they were in the ghetto of Venice. On the main street, Jewish refugees from Poland meet Spanish Jews. The painter Rembrandt lived in the middle of the Jewish business quarter. The everyday hustle and bustle outside his front door provided him with numerous motifs and faces. Here they lived on, Spanish Jews in their expensive clothes who paid well for a portrait like The Jewish Bride, commissioned by a rich merchant. Rembrandt gave the poor Polish Jews on his street money to pose for him. He was inspired by their alien rituals, their clothing and culture. He painted them with noticeable sympathy, people who had to suffer so much wretchedness. The Sephardim, the Spanish Jews, considered themselves the representatives of a higher Jewry. They were cultivated, what they thought was the bom Judesmo, worthy Jewry. With condescension, they looked at the unrefined behavior of the Ashkenazi Polish Jews. They set themselves apart from them by calling themselves the elite. In 1675, the synagogue of the Sephardic Jews was consecrated. Its dimensions still give an insight into the power and size of the community. Amsterdam became the Dutch Jerusalem, and finally it was said that Israel was living in safety. The descendants of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, whose families were persecuted and forced to convert to Christianity, prayed here. During the 17th century, the return to the faith of their fathers opened up many questions. Who still knew the old rituals and laws? Decades of being uprooted and living their lives in a Christian environment had buried many old traditions. They adopt the old religion, but they have new questions, such as, how can Jewish religious laws be reconciled with everyday life? The Etz Haim library of the synagogue reflects this search and this doubt. The oldest extant Jewish library in the world shows what the Jewish community was interested in: theological writings, natural sciences, and philosophy. It's a collection of the knowledge of the 17th century. In this field of tension between modernity and tradition, a significant philosopher develops his ideas. Baruch Spinoza, also the son of a Spanish immigrant. His writings cause a scandal. In 1656, he's banished from the Amsterdam congregation. What was so shocking about his ideas? In Rinsburg, not far from Amsterdam, Spinoza continues to work on a philosophical treatise. He questions the religious content of Judaism. The Bible isn't a revelation from God, he says, but a story written down by man. With that, Spinoza lays the foundation of modern Bible criticism. His banishment shows, on the one hand, the desire of the community to set limits to the critical questioning of the traditions. On the other hand, it was dangerous in the Calvinistic surroundings of Amsterdam to have in the community a radical Jew like Spinoza who questioned the foundations of faith that were also sacred in the Christian religion. Glickel von Hameln finds a good match for her daughter. Zipporah is married to a Hofjude, a so-called court Jew. He has an influential position at the court of a Christian prince as financial advisor, credit provider and supplier of luxury goods that can't be had without good connections. We had an elegant wedding in Amsterdam like there hadn't been in 100 years. The wedding rings are exchanged. According to Jewish ritual, the pair are now considered married. They drink from one beaker, a symbol of the chalice of life that they will be sharing in the future. It is said to be blessed by God. At the end, the bridegroom must trample the glass in memory of the destruction of the Jewish temple and the fragility of all happiness. Through their influence amongst the powerful in Europe, the court Jews opened the doors to modern Judaism. The descendant of one court Jew, the philosopher Moses Mendelssohn, will demand the emancipation and equal treatment for all Jews.